This is the GMS Magazine podcast, a podcast all about board games, role playing games, and the people who make them. Sometimes the people who play them too. I am Paco Garcia, one of your, I would say, rather gorgeous co hosts.
This is Chris from DSX Machina and Tavern Snaps, and thank you for having me as always.
Look, no, I don't think people tell us often enough what a pair of dashing, good looking, white looking men we are. Um, so why not do it myself?
Absolutely. So I got a quick question for you, and we talked about this before, and I'm still kind of there's a part of me that's trying to reprogram my thinking. So
Okay.
I will appreciate your feedback because your opinion is valuable to me. One of my favorite content creators was talking about the term that he does videos on TikTok. He's always been very open about his inclusivity,
Mhm.
and he's been very friendly. He doesn't seem at all to be someone that would express any bigoted opinions, but he did a video recently where he defended the use of guys. And he made a statement about the fact that he believed the term guys had become gender neutral. You and I had this conversation on the podcast a few weeks ago. And the counter was the fact that would you be okay if somebody called a bunch of you and your friends girls? And that's usually the common point. And he said that that actually happened to him. And he believes that if you're the majority, like hangs out with some women, and one of them approached them and said, "Hey, girls, how you doing?" And he felt accepted rather than ostracized. He felt accepted, and he embraced being one of the girls at that moment in time. Um, and I'm trying to reprogram myself because that's been my default my entire life is to say, "Hey guys, how we doing? Hey guys." I said, I open up with "Hey guys." I start my videos with "Hey guys." And it's one of those things where it's a default. How does one reprogram out of it? And is there a point where you think that can't like I know you don't believe it is a gender neutral term. You've expressed that. Um, do you think there's because unfortunately there's just an issue with the English language. We don't have a gender neutral group that flows off the tongue. I can't go say, "Hey people, how you doing?" because you end up sounding like Steve Buscemi approaching a bunch of teenagers. It
Okay.
feels very weirdly impersonal.
That is a very tricky one because over the last few years, I've kind of changed my mind in terms of how language works.
Mm,
As far as I'm concerned, and this is because in Spain we have a this massive issue about gender neutral pronouns. We don't have any, so we are inventing some, and some people are incredibly against it. So they are trying to be very, very spoken so they can become the norm. So a language is made of basically the way that people use the words. So if enough people use the word in one way, then that word gets that meaning. That's it. That's why language evolves and language changes and
yeah, we have new words being added to our vernacular.
correct.
Like,
And even the
yeah,
way that they're used. 30 years ago, you wouldn't say that saying that something is sick would mean that something is very cool or something is dope.
the interesting one for me recently, as a quick aside, has been how language has been adjusted thanks to content filters on social media.
That is another tricky one because
Like it's not a
um,
gun, it's a pew pew.
correct,
You're not committing, you're saying sewer slide or you're unaliving rather than saying killing or something like that because
correct.
to get around those triggers. I find that fascinating that it's evolving based off of technology and filters that we are self-imposing.
But you talk about words, but the same thing can be applied to both grammar and sentences because Google favors for SEO issues, they favor short sentences. So if you write long sentences, your search engine optimization will suffer. So people are writing shorter
That's
sentences.
why.
It
Sorry, it says I'm famous for my run-on sentences.
So that absolutely sucks. But that's the way it goes. So going back to the word guys, the only reason why I advocate not using it is because even though it could be interpreted, and indeed in some places, especially in the US, is a gender neutral word, it has become gender neutral. but it still can damage a lot of people when they hear the word. People who are developing their personalities, people who are accepting themselves as something else than a man or as something else than themselves. It doesn't matter what. So hearing the word guys can be triggering and dysphoric. So although per se I don't have any issues with the word guy becoming gender neutral in time and as they are used, I would advocate for its use to be careful, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because what you're doing could be hurting people who are just caught in the crossfire of language evolution, and they don't deserve
Mm,
that. They just don't
very
deserve it.
true. Very true.
So that's one of the reasons. In Spanish, because we don't have gender neutral, people will say hello everyone, and everyone is todos. Now we can have todos,
Todo? What
todos,
is it?
T O
Todos?
D yes, TODOS,
Todos.
todos, and that is for all of you male, or todas for all of you women.
So which is the gender? Like, if you guys are creating a gender neutral,
That's the
what?
thing. Okay, but
So it's
wait,
todos
wait a
for
second.
men
Wait.
and todas for women.
But it becomes more complicated because traditionally we used to have, etymologically speaking, we used to have a gender neutral, but it was very similar to the male,
Ah,
and it has become canon. So todos is meant to be the gender neutral, but is also masculine. So the way that I'm addressing that is by eliminating it. So I don't say hello everyone, I just say hello.
mm-hmm.
Or I will say hello a todo el mundo, hello to everyone.
What is it? Say again.
Hola
Hello.
a
Oh,
todo el mundo.
todo
Hello,
el mundo.
hello all the world.
Yeah.
And that encompasses everyone truly. Because the
Yeah. I just don't
world.
think I can. I don't think I can go to a room of three people like "Hello, world." That it would seem a little weird.
No, but in Spanish is the norm.
Yeah.
Todo el mundo, although it translates
Todo el
literally as all
mundo.
the world, but it translates as everyone in a place. So
Yeah.
if you are in a concert and you say hola a todo el mundo, you're addressing the whole crowd. When you say todos, it could be interpreted that you're only addressing men, even though it is the neutral, but it's also the masculine. But if you said hola todas, then you're only addressing women, and men get really shitty about that. So it is very, very complicated. So
So
yeah,
yeah.
if
Speaking of language,
yeah,
that
nice
was
segue there. Yeah, just kidding.
there's been a lot of talk, and the thing is, this talk's been going on all year regarding words that were said by Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons.
Mhm.
This exploded recently because um, asshat Elon Musk, a person that someone literally said that he has been corrupted by the social media pitfall, and it's almost sad. You see someone because there was someone who was like you forget the fact that he voted Obama and was a proud leftist less than 8 years ago, and how quickly someone can fall. Talked about D&D. I won't go into his tweet. People can find his tweet. I don't even know. I turned off my Twitter. I'm out of that. But he did tell the current creators of the D&D to burn in hell over their acknowledging. Now, there are two kind of, I wouldn't say pivotal figures per se, but two people that this is being focused around within my ergosphere. The first is Ben Riggs, who wrote an article on July 7th called Yes, he was sexist, talking about as how the key of preserving his legacy, to be honest. And it comes down to some things he has said in print that has been verified. Like they literally have images of this, right? Things he said that are honestly really horrible. Things that even I wouldn't have done in my youth when that type of stuff was tolerated. As someone who grew up with basic D&D under Gygax in the late 80s and then evolved into the later editions that he was not part of. Ben Riggs' article, you can find it right at benriggs.com. I suggest you read the whole article. And I think it's very honest, it's very open, and it talks about the fact that that he said these things. He was unabashedly, I think. The other one is Frank Metzer. Frank Metzer obviously is someone who knew Gygax and has made statements on his wall, but has been defending Gygax to what he believes is a extremely recent reanalysis of history that he believes is painting Gary as unfairly bigoted. And he brings up certain things that are things that he witnessed. He believes that the quotes are being taken out of context. He believes that some things are being exaggerated. He said he knew him for 25 plus years, and that's I wouldn't say that there's a fight going on. They've been very, very civil, and there's no been flaming, but there's definitely been two versions. There's been two thoughts about the fact that yes, he was sexist. We have to acknowledge that. And then the people saying that these are highly taken out of context. I knew him personally. He did not come off of that. For me, I have to acknowledge the fact that someone doesn't write something like that to that extreme, and then someone says, "Oh, you're exaggerating. You're mistaking." Like, no. He said that's a pretty vile quote.
Look, anyone who says that women have a different brain chemistry and that's why they are not very good at RPGs and that's why they don't like RPGs is sexist. That's it. I mean, there is no other way to look at it. And Gygax says that. I have read that post. He said that. That is sexist. That's it. Out of ignorance and not malice. I grant that. But that is sexist. And I don't understand why people feel this need to defend him. I just don't get it.
It comes down to, and this is something where we talk about legacy, and this is something that pops up, related regards to some of my favorite science fiction and fantasy genres. We talk about the fact that can we appreciate H.P. Lovecraft's or the Cthulhu mythos, knowing what we now know, what many people have been saying has been now irrefutable evidence of what H.P. Lovecraft believed in. It's public domain. There's no coinage going back to an estate. Furthermore, there's even been attempts to, like, there was a show called Lovecraft Country, which paired the Lovecraftian mythos with the racist history of the United States and making the main characters non-white for that express reason, to play off of these, which is a brilliant thing, brilliant show. But I think of what other people have said regarding Star Trek. Star Trek, always very inclusive, talked about inclusivity, created by someone who really, really promoted the inclusivity. Let's bring some Russians, let's bring some Black characters. Then you asked him about his feelings on women, and everything got a little quiet in the room. And this is one of the reasons why the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation is so awkward and so really uncomfortable. There's a documentary that is just about the making of the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation that shows you how the legacy sexism of Star Trek was trying to weave itself into the modern Star Trek, and how they had to push Roddenberry and his enablers, lawyers and so forth, out of the picture so they can try to create a system. And how some of my favorite content creators who are diehard fans of, once again, Jesse Gender, brilliant content creator, they made some of the most amazing videos trying to discuss what is so problematic and how the franchise moves on. And it does it by acknowledging it, and the fact that they also acknowledge the fact that even Roddenberry himself started to near his life started to go, yeah, there were some issues, um, but he also like when we think about the Roddenberry sexism and Gygax sexism are nothing alike.
No.
They're very different. They manifest in very different ways.
And
Um,
okay, the thing to me is, I think that one of the reasons why people get so upset when they say that their heroes were racist or sexist is twofold. Because there's still some people who will go up in arms when you tell them that Lovecraft was a racist piece of shit.
oh, he was bad.
He was, I mean, he called his cat the N word.
Yeah, his anti-Semitism was legendary.
Even Howard Phillips at the time said, dude, chill. And he was not particularly inclusive, for goodness sake. But I think it's twofold. One is that they associate being sexist with being a bad person. And they think that they will be seen as a bad person if they like a product that it is sexist. It's not the case. It is not the case. I have enjoyed D&D for decades. And I have been a participant in that sexism, and I have been a sexist piece of shit because I was a fucking teenager who was learning about the world and how not to be sexist. We've all gone through that, and it is okay. It's okay to admit that, having all the evil dragons being female is an issue. That having a belt that changes your gender from man to woman and considered a curse, that is an issue. That all the main characters are male, that is an issue. That's okay. We can go into that. We can look into it. We can still enjoy it and acknowledge that it is an issue without being shitty people.
We could acknowledge the strengths and what we love about an IP and divorce it from the complexities of the human that created them. We do that with Roddenberry.
Well, wait a second.
Star Trek.
Wait a second. I'm not going to say to dissociate it from the person that made it, because I don't think that's a good idea. I never ever separate the art from the artist. It's just
we had this conversation once before. Yeah, I'm aware of that. The fact that
it is simply to acknowledge that there was another time and there was a reason for the way that they thought the way they thought, and that doesn't mean that they did it maliciously at the time. Heidi Gygax came out on Facebook to defend her father and how she never felt that he was being sexist toward her in any way, shape, or form. And I believe her. I believe her because the fact that he didn't think of women the same way that he thought of men doesn't mean that he treated them in a more demeaning or different manner. So I'm sure that he was incredibly loving and nurturing toward their children. And I'm sure that they didn't see that their parent pushed Ernie and Luke toward D&D a great deal more than he did with Heidi and Gale. For instance, I'm guessing here, okay? So this may not be the case, but maybe he didn't push them the same way. Maybe he didn't adapt the adventures to adventures that his daughters could have played, and that is the sexism. Did they see it? Did they experience it? No. And therefore, they cannot say it. So what I'm getting at is that not everyone is sexist for the same reason, to the same level, or in the same way with the same people. Sexism is very, very much, considering that there are a few, communal components or common components, but the way it expresses is very idiosyncratic and down to the person. So maybe he didn't show overtly, his sexism in a, no, you're not allowed to work. You have to stay home to raise our kids. Or no, you're not allowed to drive or to have a passport without my permission, woman. Maybe he wasn't like that, but he certainly thought that men and women were different in a very sexist manner, and that's undeniable.
Yeah, I mean, Gygax it's ironic that Gygax is being defended by Elon Musk, because I don't think that when we get down to it, we know the fact that Gygax was a much better human being than
Well,
Elon Musk. And you look at how his relationship with his family as a perfect example. But even more so is also that it also proves the fact that when we look at his children, especially his sons, we see two very divergent human beings.
three actually. He's got three sons, not two.
Oh,
But
three sons. I'm sorry.
he's
I'm
got
sorry.
three.
Yeah.
But yeah, but one of them I cannot even remember his name, to be honest. He's never in the spotlight, in the D&D spotlight. He's
Yeah,
been
I speak
from,
of his more socially minded
yeah.
children. Yeah. But this is something else comes into. So we talked about Star Trek. I know that Star Trek owns up. Like one thing I appreciate about Star Trek is they don't try to separate Roddenberry from the franchise. They never try to kick him out. They always try, yep, this is what he said. This is what we did. This is how it was. This is how the franchise has evolved. This is how it's kind of keep the spirit of what he was trying to say. We acknowledge what he said, but they never at any point tried to say, this is not Roddenberry's universe, this is ours. They always try to acknowledge it. And I always appreciated the fact that, and of course, for those people who are watching, if you haven't had a chance, have you seen the unification video on the Oto site?
I have not.
It's a wonderful, I won't go on to too much of it, but it's a wonderful video done by a very, very well-established computer animation company that through digital prosthetics and a few things have created one of the most amazing videos where they reunite a young Nimoy and a young Shatner. It is truly it's incredibly emotional. I cry my eyes out every time I try to watch it. It's so amazingly well made. But this brings up something else about where I think, and this is something where it's I don't see it's pure speculation because it is. I wonder how Gygax's opinion and his views are based on the genres he embraced and how he wrote for. And the reason why I say it like that, because I'm a huge sci-fi fan, I think one of the reasons why I moved more and more into being someone on the left and being someone who tried to be inclusive was because of my adoration for Star Trek, right? I was not a fan of fantasy because, and I'll say it, is that the fantasy genre is, and it was for the longest time, it is rampant with sexism, anti-secular views, bigoted views. It's not a genre where a lot of the writers felt that they were trying to make a point compared to science fiction, where a lot of writers felt that they wanted to make points. Fantasy was about fantasy, is escapism, to create something that was holy, where science fiction wanted to turn a lens to our society and take it. It wasn't as much about escapism. And I look at, you go, well, he was sexist. I go, yeah, but he was also writing a sexist book that was in a sexist genre inspired by a sexist series. And it's that's one of the things I like is it really so much as that is, or is it more just a part like of an entire genre that has always been, in my opinion, rampant with anti-secular views and sexist views and so forth. You look at all the way back from Conan the Barbarian and all that. It's always been, I mean, one of the things people talked about with the Conan, I can't remember if it was the MMO or the RPG, where you could play as a woman, and it was a completely separate class where where that was the whole thing. Women were trophies. They were things to claim. And this was an aspect, and I talk about the religious overtones. Almost every story had gods part of that story, and that is part of that. It's embracing that indoctrination of making people accepting the fact that there are gods and so forth, and an actual something that was secular, actually having a fantasy and that's why his Dark Materials, which is done by the Golden Compass, the series, is so noteworthy because it's this fantasy series that is very critical of the Catholic Church, written by an atheist, and you don't see that very often. And now we're getting a lot more fantasy stories that are trying to be that way, to try to have strong female protagonists. And we've been seeing it since the 90s, but it doesn't change the fact that for the first 100 years of the fantasy genre, they were written by a majority white men who were creating white male power fantasies, right? And if we look at Lord of the Rings, what with this extremely successful fantasy series, the movie series that Jackson wrote, and people were saying it's one of the greatest movie series of all time, but they had to break the canon of the story to even include female characters, and then break it further to make them strong female characters.
Well,
and there wasn't a single character of color in that entire movie series.
No, that is very true. But I mean, Lord of the Rings, it did have Arwen and Eowyn, who were, and Galadriel. I mean, Galadriel is the most powerful being on Middle Earth at the time. So he did. The thing about Tolkien, though, is that he did change an awful lot, because if you look at The Hobbit, there's not one single female character there. Not one.
Yeah.
Not one. Then he goes to war, takes a look and sees what women can do in the field, writes Lord of the Rings, and we have Arwen, we have Eowyn, we have Galadriel.
But a lot of these characters are pushed to the sidelines. Hell, the whole Arwen romance is mostly encompassed in the appendices. Like, they literally had to bring those characters into the foreground, into the movies, to make them important. Otherwise,
yes,
they would barely have a mention.
Again, but I'm talking about levels in here.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to say is that you can be different levels of sexist. There's no doubt that still Tolkien had a sexist, racist streak to him, because that was the way that he was. But he was a lot less sexist 10 years later, because we are not the same people. And although you're absolutely right, you know, those characters have to be brought at the forefront. But, you know, Arwen did kill, you know, one of the wraiths in the book.
In the book, yeah.
In the book. She actually did it. And Galadriel was that immensely powerful being. She was there from the very, very beginning. And Eowyn, she saved Frodo and Frodo and Sam in the river when Frodo was dying. And she was the one who did it. And Aragorn, she was the one who did it. So there is a difference. They didn't take the protagonism, like, at all. The biggest protagonist that Eowyn had is that Aragorn is so in love with her that his whole life revolves about loving or wanting to love her, which I think is an absolutely beautiful thing. But if you look at the story of Luthien and Turing, I think it was, that is one of the most beautiful love stories ever. And it is mostly balanced, but at the end, Luthien, you know, the guy, takes the lead. So he was sexist, but not to the same level. He was trying not to be. That's the difference. He was trying not to be.
But you're right. I mean, people do change. And when you look at the fact that Tolkien, for example, one of the famous things is that it was Tolkien was non-religious. He was basically an outright atheist.
Oh, Beren. I beg your pardon. Beren and Luthien. Sorry.
Yeah, and it was C.S. Lewis, creator of Narnia, that actually converted Tolkien to being a Christian, which I thought was one of the strangest things in there. But what I do kind of stick with my claim that the fantasy genre for the longest time had racist, sexist undertones, and it was those undertones that permeate the very franchises that Gygax created. And so it's almost like an Ouroboros, like the snake eating the tail, how much of his sexism was something that he believed wholeheartedly, or how much of that was simply him translating the genre that he was in love with, right? And that's why I think that there's so much there's this legacy of toxicity within the fantasy genre that you don't see with Star Trek as much. You're seeing with Star Wars for the exact same reason, because there was racism and sexism within Star Wars. right? And it's they're still having issues, and that's the reason why there's so much toxicity in Star Wars, because they didn't own up to that soon enough, and now they have to deal with it.
Exactly. And again, to go back to my point at the very beginning, I just don't understand why people get their knickers in a twist over that. It's okay. Gygax was sexist. So fucking what? But the thing that I find absolutely amusing about this whole thing is, why does anybody care what Elon Musk has to say about D&D? He's not a gamer. He's not a player. He's not part of our community. He's just a motherfucker who's got into some tweets from this stupid asshole, Grooms, I think it's called, or something, who is well known for being a bigoted motherfucker and just jumped into the bandwagon just because. So my message to that would be, listen, boyo, you were able to buy Twitter to make it the shithole that it is. We dare you. We fucking dare you to buy D&D and trying to make the same thing with it. And you're going to see the largest and biggest backlash that a billionaire motherfucking piece of shit like you is ever going to see.
He doesn't have the money to buy. He doesn't have any fucking liquid assets anymore. And the funny thing is, and the thing I appreciate, if you go to the End World post, which originally broke this news about all this, and it was post after post of people saying, well, who the fuck cares what this asshole thinks? I haven't seen a single comment of someone saying, no, he's right. But the conversation about, like I said, the more civilized discourse between Riggs and Menser, that's what I wanted to focus on, because I don't want to give Musk any more life, like I said.
Okay. The thing about Mensa, we were friends on Facebook, and I unfriended him because he was getting really sexist at the time, and he was making an awful lot of really awful comments that half I can remember and the other half I will not repeat. So I'm sorry, but I don't trust his views on this matter, because he is also a very sexist old man.
I've seen some things that he's posted in the last little bit. When I went looking and researching for this conversation, I saw a bunch of stuff where I'm like, yeah, there's a reason why I don't really follow what he says.
Dog knows dog.
So that's it. That's our coverage on the Gygax thing. Gygax, yes, he was sexist. Let's accept it. Let's move on. Yeah. He created a wonderful game.
And then you can enjoy without having to feel the need to feel like a shitty asshole. So that's fine. Just
you can play D&D without guilt.
Exactly. It's not your fault that he was sexist. That's it. Yes.
Now, that being said, if you embrace I still will say that if you embrace, like, this is something that comes into another point, which maybe we'll shape for another conversation, and that is the games that are trying to recreate the classic D&D mythos, which, as I said, rampant with anti-secular views, sexism, and racism. How do we, like, and this is maybe, like I said, a point where we talk about why that's probably a reason why the OSR community can be so problematic, because they're trying to embrace an older version of fantasy role-playing, which was unfortunately saddled with these sexist and racist undertones. Because someone brought up Dungeon Crawl Classics, which was one that was once again trying to capture what is called this classic fantasy. And it's kind of like, okay, how do you pair those? How do you create a marriage between modern sensibilities and this incredibly, really uncomfortable subject matter that is no longer, in my opinion, acceptable in the modern age? And as I think said, I'm not an expert in this. I haven't played Dungeon Crawl Classics. My relationship with Goodman Games, he had a schism when he kicked out Amethyst out of his product line, and I was left to fend for myself. And we tried to work together, but every time I wrote something, he rejected it, and so I would end up going off on my own. So we haven't had a conversation probably in 6 to 8 years. I don't even know we're still friends on Facebook. We might be. I have no idea.
Fair enough. Okay, so shall we move on to the second part of the podcast? Okay, let's move. Second part coming.